That old man deserved this. Yes! Officer, arrest this old man and this man causing this trouble!
Thomas Rivera stood in his grandfather's hospital room, watching the old man sleep, and felt a rage so pure it made his hands shake. Tubes ran from Eduardo Rivera's arms. Monitors beeped steadily. The bandage around his head was stark white against his brown skin. 83 years old, and he'd fallen off a ladder because someone had stolen his wheelchair ramp. Not stolen, removed.
That old man deserved this.
Deliberately, by order of the Homeowners Association. 6 weeks earlier, everything had been different. Thomas had moved back home to help care for his grandparents. At 36, he was a civil engineer with a good job at the county, but his abuela Rosa, 79, couldn't manage everything alone anymore. His abuelo Eduardo had Parkinson's disease, and while his mind was sharp, his body was failing. They needed family. The house on Magnolia Street had been in the Rivera family for 42 years. Eduardo and Rosa had bought it in 1981, when the neighborhood was just modest homes and young families. They'd raised 3 children there, watched the neighborhood grow, buried their youngest son, Thomas's father, who died in Iraq in 2004. The house was small but immaculate. Rosa's garden was legendary: roses, herbs, vegetables, fruit trees. Eduardo had built a workshop in the garage where he taught Thomas woodworking as a child. The backyard had a memorial garden dedicated to Thomas's father, with a flagpole flying an American flag and a Gold Star Service banner. When Thomas moved in, he'd immediately noticed changes in the neighborhood. Houses had been bought up, renovated, flipped. Young professionals moving in, driving property values up. And a new homeowners association had formed, something that hadn't existed when his grandparents first bought the house. Membership was voluntary, but practically speaking, every home on the street had joined, except a handful of old-timers like Eduardo and Rosa. The pressure to join was constant. The HOA president was a woman named Catherine Ashford. Everyone called her Karen behind her back, though never to her face. She was 48, worked in pharmaceutical sales, drove a white Mercedes SUV, and treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. Thomas met her on his 3rd day back. He was installing a wheelchair ramp at the front entrance. Eduardo could still walk short distances with a walker, but the 3 steps to the front door were becoming dangerous. Thomas had pulled permits from the county, hired a licensed contractor, done everything by the book. He was reviewing the contractor's work when a white Mercedes pulled into his driveway, blocking the contractor's truck. A blonde woman in expensive athleisure wear stepped out, her face already set in disapproval. "Excuse me, what is this?" she gestured at the ramp. Thomas walked over. "A wheelchair ramp for my grandfather. Can I help you?" "I'm Catherine Ashford, HOA president. This ramp is not approved." "I have county permits. Everything's up to code." "I don't care about county permits. This is a historic neighborhood. Modifications to front-facing structures require HOA architectural review. You didn't submit an application." Thomas kept his voice level. "We're not members of the HOA." Catherine's expression hardened. "Everyone on Magnolia Street is part of the Oakwood Estates HOA. My grandparents never joined. This house predates your HOA by 30 years. "That's irrelevant. When the HOA was established, all properties were automatically enrolled unless they formally opted out within 90 days. Your grandparents didn't opt out, so they're members. Because they probably didn't know about it. My grandmother has arthritis. My grandfather has Parkinson's. They don't read fine print in legal notices." Catherine pulled out her phone and began photographing the ramp. "This is an unauthorized modification. I'm issuing a violation. The ramp must be removed within 7 days, or you'll face daily fines of $250. This is a medical necessity. My grandfather can't use the stairs safely." Then he should move to a facility designed for people with disabilities. This neighborhood has standards. Thomas felt his temper spike but controlled it. This is his home. He's lived here for 42 years. And I'm sure he's had a lovely time. But things change. Standards evolve. The ramp goes or the fines start. Your choice. She handed him a printed violation notice that she'd apparently prepared in advance, then got in her Mercedes and left. Thomas stood there, furious and disbelieving. The contractor, a weathered man named Bill, shook his head. Man, I've dealt with her before. She's a nightmare. Fought a ramp installation 2 streets over, made a disabled vet's life hell until he finally moved. She can't do this. Yeah, she can, and she will. These HOAs, they got power. You should talk to a lawyer. That evening, Thomas sat with his grandparents at the kitchen table. Rosa had made caldo de pollo, chicken soup, Eduardo's favorite. The old man's hands shook slightly as he ate, but his eyes were alert. Tell me about this HOA, Thomas said. Eduardo sighed. It started maybe 5 years ago. New people moving in, buying the old houses, making them fancy. They wanted to improve property values, they said. They came around with papers to sign. I told them no. We own our house. We keep it nice. We don't need someone telling us what to do. Rosa added, that woman, Catherine, she came here twice. Very pushy. Said everyone was joining, we should too. I told her we were fine. She got angry, said we were being difficult, said we'd regret it. Did you ever get anything official? Legal notices about joining? Some papers came in the mail, Rosa said. But Thomas, we get so much mail. Bills, advertisements, things in English we don't always understand. We might have thrown it away. Thomas felt a knot form in his stomach. So they might claim you were notified. I don't know, Mijo, maybe. Thomas spent that night researching Texas HOA law. What he found was disturbing. HOAs had broad powers, especially in neighborhoods where they'd been established with developer support. Homeowners could challenge membership, but it required legal action. And in the meantime, HOAs could issue fines, place liens, even foreclose on properties. He called a real estate attorney the next morning. The consultation was blunt. Fighting the HOA would be expensive, time-consuming, and uncertain. The ramp issue specifically was tricky because federal disability law should protect it, but HOAs had successfully argued architectural control in the past. My advice, the lawyer said, try to negotiate. Maybe they'll approve a different ramp design, something less visible from the street. It's a wheelchair ramp. It needs to be at the front entrance. I understand, but you're looking at a legal battle that could cost $20,000 and take 2 years. Is that worth it? Thomas didn't have $20,000, and his grandfather needed that ramp now, not in 2 years. He tried negotiating. He called Catherine and requested a meeting. She agreed with the caveat that he come to her house, not the other way around. Catherine's house was 6 blocks away, a newly renovated craftsman with professional landscaping and a fountain in the front yard. She met him in her home office, which was decorated with motivational posters about excellence and leadership. Thank you for seeing me, Thomas said, keeping his tone respectful. I'd like to discuss the ramp situation. There's nothing to discuss. The ramp violates architectural standards. It must be removed. Mrs. Ashford, my grandfather served in the Marines. He worked for the city for 37 years. He's lived in this neighborhood longer than most current residents have been alive. He has Parkinson's disease. That ramp is a medical necessity. I sympathize truly, but rules are rules. If I make an exception for you, I have to make exceptions for everyone. The neighborhood standards fall apart. This isn't about standards. It's about accessibility. Federal law protects reasonable accommodations for disabled individuals. Catherine's expression turned cold. Are you threatening me with a lawsuit? I'm asking you to do the right thing. The right thing is maintaining property values for all homeowners. Your grandparents' situation is unfortunate, But it's not the HOA's problem. The ramp goes, or you pay the fines. Those are your options. Thomas left, knowing negotiation was pointless. Over the next week, the situation escalated. Catherine sent daily violation notices. She posted about the illegal modification in the HOA Facebook group with photos of the ramp and comments about some homeowners who think rules don't apply to them. Neighbors started driving by slowly, staring. Some were sympathetic, older residents who'd known Eduardo and Rosa for decades. But others, newer arrivals who'd bought into Catherine's vision of a pristine, controlled neighborhood, sided with her. Thomas installed the ramp anyway. It was bolted down, code compliant, and made Eduardo's life significantly safer. The fines started immediately, $250 per day. After 7 days, $1,750 in fines. After 14 days, $3,500. Catherine sent the invoices via certified mail, with legal language about liens and foreclosure. Thomas consulted another lawyer. Same answer. Fighting this properly would cost more than the fines. Can they actually foreclose over this? Thomas asked. Eventually, yes. If the fines accumulate to a significant amount and you don't pay, they can place a lien on the property and, in extreme cases, force a sale to recover the debt. That's insane. That's HOA law in Texas. Thomas made a decision. He would document everything, look for any legal angle, and fight this however he could. But in the meantime, his grandfather needed that ramp, and it was staying. Catherine, frustrated that her fines weren't working, changed tactics. One morning, Thomas left for work at 7 a.m. The ramp was there, functioning, safe. He'd helped Eduardo use it just that morning for his daily walk around the block with his walker. When Thomas came home at 6 p.m., the ramp was gone. Not damaged, not vandalized, completely removed. Professional work. The bolts had been cut, the structure dismantled, and nothing remained except holes in the concrete where it had been anchored. Rosa was in tears. Eduardo was furious. They came at noon, Rosa said. A truck, 2 men with tools. They said they had authorization from the HOA. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the ramp was already gone. Thomas called the police himself. The responding officer was sympathetic, but limited in what he could do. It's a civil matter, sir. If the HOA claims authority to remove unauthorized structures, that's between you and them. You'd need to sue for damages. They stole our property. They'd argue they removed an unauthorized modification. I'm sorry. This is out of our jurisdiction. After the officer left, Thomas helped his grandfather navigate the front steps with the walker. Eduardo was shaking with effort and anger. I can do it, the old man insisted. I don't need their permission to enter my own house. Abuelo, please, let me help. But Eduardo, proud and stubborn, waved him off. He made it up 2 steps. On the third, his foot caught. His weakened leg couldn't compensate. He fell backward. Thomas caught him barely, but Eduardo's head struck the edge of the concrete step. Blood immediately. Rosa screaming. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later. Eduardo was conscious but disoriented. At the hospital, they diagnosed a concussion, 3 stitches to close the scalp wound, and recommended overnight observation. Thomas sat with his grandmother in the emergency room waiting area. Rosa was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, her hands knotted with arthritis. She held a rosary and prayed quietly. This is my fault, she whispered. I should have signed their papers. I should have just done what they wanted. No, Abuela, this is not your fault. This is on them. They did this. Eduardo could have died. He didn't. He's strong. But this ends now. I'm not letting them get away with this. Thomas made calls. First, to a personal injury attorney. The case was clear. The HOA's removal of a medically necessary accessibility ramp had directly resulted in injury to a disabled elderly man. The attorney agreed to take the case on contingency. Second, to the local news. A reporter from the ABC affiliate was interested. Elderly disabled veteran injured after HOA removes wheelchair ramp was exactly the kind of story that generated outrage and ratings. Third, to social media. Thomas created a Facebook post detailing what had happened, with photos of Eduardo's injury, the missing ramp, and Catherine's violation notices. He tagged local community groups, veterans organizations, and disability rights advocates. The post went viral within hours. By the next morning, it had 10,000 shares. News crews were calling. Veterans groups were mobilizing. Disability rights organizations were threatening legal action. And Catherine Ashford was getting destroyed in the court of public opinion. She tried to control the narrative, posting in the HOA Facebook group that the ramp had been unsafe and unpermitted, and that the HOA had acted to protect residents. But her own members turned on her. Several homeowners resigned from the HOA in protest. Others posted their own stories of Catherine's harassment. One woman, Jennifer Park, wrote, "Catherine Ashford threatened to fine me $500 because my son's therapy swing was visible from the street. My son is autistic. The swing is medical equipment. She didn't care. She told me to put him in a facility if I couldn't control his needs. This woman is a monster." Another resident, David Torres, posted, "Catherine tried to force my mother to remove her vegetable garden, claiming it violated aesthetic standards. My mother is 72 and has grown vegetables for 50 years. The garden feeds half the elderly folks on our street. Catherine called it agricultural use incompatible with residential zoning. She's out of control." The stories multiplied. A pattern emerged of Catherine targeting elderly residents, people with disabilities, and anyone she perceived as not fitting her vision of what the neighborhood should be. The news coverage hit that evening. The local ABC affiliate led with the story. HOA president under fire after disabled veteran injured. The segment showed Eduardo in his hospital bed, speaking with difficulty but with clarity. "I served this country. I worked hard my whole life. I own my home. And this woman, she thinks she can tell me I can't have a ramp to enter my own house. She thinks she can hurt me and my family because we don't fit a neighborhood." Rosa appeared on camera, her voice shaking but determined. "We never bothered anyone. We kept our house nice. We helped our neighbors. And this is how they treat us. Because we're old. Because we're Mexican. Because we don't speak perfect English. This is wrong." Thomas spoke last. The HOA removed a medically necessary accessibility ramp without notice, without permission, and without regard for my grandfather's safety. He fell because of their actions. He could have died. And for what? Because a ramp didn't match someone's aesthetic vision. That's not community management. That's cruelty. The segment ended with Catherine's house, shown on camera, her Mercedes in the driveway, and the reporter noting that Catherine had declined to comment. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The HOA's Facebook page was flooded with angry comments. Catherine's personal social media accounts were bombarded. Veterans groups organized protests. The local VFW chapter announced they were installing a new ramp at the Rivera house themselves, free of charge, and daring the HOA to remove it. Within 48 hours, a GoFundMe for the Rivera family's legal expenses raised $37,000. Catherine tried to ride out the storm. She posted a statement claiming the media had misrepresented the situation, that the HOA had legitimate concerns about permit compliance, and that Eduardo's injury was unfortunate, but not the HOA's responsibility. The statement only made things worse. Then someone leaked the HOA's financial records. Thomas didn't know who at first. Later he'd learn it was Bate Morrison, the HOA secretary who'd been bullied by Catherine for years and finally had enough. But whoever it was sent a complete copy of 5 years of HOA finances to Thomas, to the media, and to several homeowners. Thomas forwarded them to his attorney and to a forensic accountant the attorney recommended. What they found was explosive. Catherine had been systematically embezzling from the HOA for at least 4 years. She'd created shell companies for maintenance services and consulting that existed only on paper. She'd billed the HOA for work that was never performed. She'd pocketed cash from assessments. She'd used HOA funds to pay for personal expenses, including her Mercedes lease and a vacation to Hawaii. Total amount stolen, over $163,000. But there was more. The accountant found something else, a pattern of property acquisitions. In the past 3 years, 17 homes in Oakwood Estates had been sold. In 12 of those cases, Catherine had issued escalating violations and fines in the months before the sale. In 9 of those cases, Catherine had personally represented the buyer as their real estate agent, earning commissions. She'd been systematically forcing people out to generate real estate sales for herself. The evidence was overwhelming. Thomas turned it over to the district attorney's office. They opened a criminal investigation immediately. Catherine, realizing she was in serious trouble, tried to flee. She withdrew $40,000 in cash from a personal account, booked a flight to Costa Rica, and told her neighbors she was taking a vacation to let things cool down. But Bate Morrison, the secretary, had recorded a conversation where Catherine admitted to borrowing from the HOA account and said she needed to get out of the country before the lawyers start digging. Bate turned the recording over to police. Catherine was arrested at the airport 2 hours before her flight. The charges: embezzlement, fraud, theft, exploitation of the elderly, and assault for the ramp removal that led to Eduardo's injury. The bail hearing was chaotic. The prosecutor argued Catherine was a flight risk, literally, given she'd been arrested trying to leave the country. The judge agreed and set bail at $250,000. Catherine couldn't make it. She spent 3 weeks in county jail before her family scraped together enough for a bail bondsman. Meanwhile, Eduardo recovered. The concussion healed. The stitches came out, but the fall had shaken him badly. His Parkinson's symptoms worsened from the stress. He became afraid of the front steps, sometimes refusing to leave the house. Rosa aged 10 years in a month. The stress of nearly losing her husband, combined with the public attention and legal proceedings, took its toll. Her arthritis flared. She had trouble sleeping. Thomas often found her awake at 2 a.m., praying the rosary in the kitchen. The VFW did install a new ramp, with a permit explicitly approved by the county and protected under federal ADA regulations. They held a small ceremony, with a Veterans Honor Guard and a speech about defending those who defended the country. Eduardo cried during the ceremony. So did Rosa. The legal battles unfolded over months. The personal injury lawsuit against the HOA was settled quickly. The HOA's insurance company, unwilling to go to trial with such damning facts, offered $350,000. Eduardo and Rosa accepted. The criminal case against Catherine took longer. She hired expensive attorneys and tried to fight the charges, claiming the HOA finances were complex and that any discrepancies were accounting errors, not theft. But the evidence was too strong. The shell companies, the falsified invoices, the recorded admission, the flight attempt. Her attorneys eventually convinced her to accept a plea deal, plead guilty to embezzlement and exploitation of the elderly, serve 4 years in prison, pay full restitution, and surrender her real estate license permanently. Catherine refused at first, convinced she could win at trial. Her lawyers finally convinced her that a jury would hate her. The optics were terrible. Wealthy white woman stealing from working-class families and injuring an elderly disabled Hispanic veteran. She took the plea. The sentencing hearing was packed. Thomas attended with Eduardo and Rosa, though Eduardo was in a wheelchair now. The fall had accelerated his decline. Dozens of Oakwood Estates residents filled the courtroom. The prosecutor presented evidence of Catherine's crimes: the embezzlement, the harassment, the pattern of targeting vulnerable residents. They played the recording of Catherine admitting to theft and planning to flee the country. Then came victim impact statements. Jennifer Parks spoke about her autistic son and Catherine's cruelty. She told me my child was an inconvenience to the neighborhood. She suggested I institutionalize him. She's not fit to have power over anyone. David Torres spoke about his mother's garden. She tried to destroy something that brought joy and food to elderly people who'd lived here for decades. She didn't care about community. She cared about control. A dozen others spoke. Stories of harassment, threats, violations designed to force people out. Finally, Thomas spoke. Your Honor, my grandparents are immigrants who came to this country with nothing. They worked hard. They bought a home. They raised a family. They lost their son in Iraq, defending the freedoms we all enjoy. They asked for nothing except to live in peace in a home they'd earned. Catherine Ashford decided they didn't belong, not because they'd done anything wrong, but because they were old, disabled, and didn't fit her vision. She harassed them. She stole from them. And her actions directly injured my grandfather, a man who'd already given so much to this country. This wasn't about HOA rules. This was about cruelty, about someone who had a little bit of power and used it to hurt people weaker than herself. She stole money, yes, but she also stole peace, safety, and dignity from people who deserved better. My grandfather's Parkinson's has gotten worse since the fall. He's afraid to leave his house now. My grandmother has nightmares. I had to move back home to take care of them, not because of their age or illness, but because of what this woman did to them. We're asking this court to hold her accountable, fully, completely, so that no one else has to endure what my family has endured. Rosa, sitting in the front row, wiped tears. Eduardo reached over and held her hand with his trembling fingers. The judge, a stern man in his 60s, looked at Catherine. Do you have anything to say before sentencing? Catherine stood. For a moment, Thomas thought she might apologize. Instead, I was trying to maintain standards. I was trying to protect property values. If people didn't like the rules, they didn't have to live there. I made some mistakes with bookkeeping, but I didn't deserve to be vilified like this. The media made me out to be a monster. I'm not. I was just doing my job. The courtroom erupted in angry murmurs. The judge gavelled for silence. Ms. Ashford, you stole over $163,000 from people who trusted you. You harassed elderly residents, people with disabilities, and anyone who didn't conform to your personal preferences. You directly caused serious injury to an 83-year-old disabled veteran. And even now, you show no genuine remorse. You weren't doing your job. You were abusing power, stealing money, and hurting vulnerable people. The court sentences you to the maximum term under the plea agreement, 6 years in state prison, with credit for time served. You will pay full restitution of $163,000 to the Oakwood Estates HOA. You will surrender your real estate license permanently. Upon release, you will serve 5 years supervised probation, during which you are prohibited from serving on any HOA board or in any position of fiduciary responsibility. Bailiff, remand the defendant. Catherine's face went white. Her attorney tried to speak, but the judge was done. Catherine was led out in handcuffs, crying, protesting it wasn't fair. The courtroom remained silent until she was gone. Then, spontaneous applause. Outside the courthouse, news cameras waited. Thomas made a brief statement. Justice was served today, not just for my family, but for everyone Catherine Ashford harmed. HOAs are supposed to serve communities, not terrorize them. What happened to my grandparents should never happen to anyone. We are grateful to everyone who stood with us, who spoke up, who refused to accept cruelty as normal. The transformation of Oakwood Estates happened quickly. With Catherine gone and her allies resigned in disgrace, the HOA held emergency elections. New board members were elected. Retired teacher Linda Reyes, small business owner Marcus Webb, and longtime resident Helen Garcia. Their first acts: void all pending fines and violations issued under Catherine's administration. Implement financial transparency with monthly public reports. reduce dues by 40% once proper budgeting was established, and create a formal appeals process for any future violations. The neighborhood culture changed. People who'd been afraid to talk to each other started having conversations. Block parties returned. The community garden that Catherine had tried to ban was expanded, with Eduardo and Rosa as honorary advisors. Eduardo's health stabilized. He still used the wheelchair most of the time, but with the ramp and Thomas's help, he could get outside, sit in the garden, enjoy the sunshine. The fear from the fall gradually lessened. Rosa's arthritis remained, but her spirit recovered. She started teaching neighborhood children how to garden, showing them how to grow tomatoes and peppers and herbs. She became the unofficial abuela of Magnolia Street, treating every child like her own grandchild. Thomas met someone. Her name was Elena Martinez. She worked as a teacher, and she'd moved to the neighborhood during the chaos of Catherine's downfall. She'd heard the story and had immediately donated to the legal fund. When she met Thomas at a community meeting, they connected. 6 months after Catherine's sentencing, Thomas and Elena were dating seriously. Eduardo approved. "She's good for you, Mijo, and she actually eats your grandmother's cooking, which means she's smart." A year after everything started, the neighborhood held a celebration. It was officially to mark the installation of a new community center playground, but everyone knew it was really about moving forward from the Catherine era. Eduardo and Rosa were guests of honor. Eduardo, in his wheelchair, gave a short speech, his voice shaking but clear. "Thank you all for standing with my family. We came to this country 54 years ago with hope. We wanted to work hard, raise our family, be good neighbors. Most of the time, America was good to us. But sometimes people like Catherine, they make you feel like you don't belong, like you're not good enough, like your home isn't really yours. You all reminded us that's not true. That good people are stronger than one bad person. That community means standing together. Rosa and I, we're old now. We won't be here much longer. But we'll leave knowing that our neighbors, our friends, our community, they fought for us. They didn't let us be erased. That means everything." There wasn't a dry eye in the park. Rosa added, quieter, "And anyone who wants to learn to make tamales, come to my house next Saturday. I teach you." Laughter, applause, and love. Thomas looked around at the neighborhood. Children playing on the new playground, neighbors sharing food, music playing, the American flag flying over Eduardo's memorial garden for Thomas's father. This was what community was supposed to be. Not control, not conformity, not some HOA president's vision of perfection. Just people, caring for each other, standing up for each other, building something together. Catherine Ashford had tried to destroy that. She'd weaponized rules, stolen money, and hurt the most vulnerable people she could find. She'd thought her power was absolute. She'd been wrong. The community had fought back. With evidence, with solidarity, with media attention, with legal action, and most importantly, with the simple moral clarity that what she was doing was wrong. And they'd won. 300 miles away, Catherine Ashford sat in a prison cell, working a kitchen job for 42 cents an hour. Her real estate career was over. Her reputation was destroyed. Her freedom was gone, and she had 4 more years of this ahead of her. Back in Oakwood Estates, life moved forward. Better, kinder, stronger. Eduardo and Rosa lived their final years in peace, surrounded by family and genuine community. When Eduardo passed 2 years later, peacefully in his sleep, the entire neighborhood came to his funeral. Veterans gave a final salute. Rosa scattered some of his ashes in the memorial garden next to the flag. When Rosa followed him a year after that, holding Thomas's hand and whispering that she'd see Eduardo soon, the neighborhood mourned her like they'd lost their own mother. The house on Magnolia Street stayed in the family. Thomas and Elena married and moved in, raising their children in the home where Thomas's grandparents had built their American dream. The ramp stayed, a permanent reminder of what had been fought for and won. And every year on Memorial Day, the neighborhood gathered at Eduardo's memorial garden. They honored all veterans, especially Eduardo. They remembered Rosa, and they told the story of how one family, with the support of their community, stood up to a tyrant and won. Not because they were powerful, but because they were right. And sometimes, in America,